I am Mary Grace, and I have with me today Dr. Sean Baker. I am the host and founder of the Mary Grace Show. Dr. Sean Baker is the author of The Carnivore Diet. He is known as the Carnivore Doctor. He has appeared on the Joe Rogan Show, and he is the co-founder of Rivero.com. We are here today with the Healing America and Beyond series. This is episode 3 in the year of 2025, and we are interested in helping America and the lands beyond to get healthier through diet and lifestyle. And we're wanting to talk to you about some of the things that we've discovered. Dr. Sean Baker is a leader in the carnivore diet space, but also in the space of nutrition and fitness in general. And so we want to jump in today and have this conversation. We appreciate everybody being here with us. Please give us a shout in the comments and let us know where you're following from. And if you're not already subscribed, please subscribe to the Mary Grace Show and also to Dr. Sean Baker's channel. Dr. Baker, it looks like he is doing some retweets. So if you're on X, let us know over there that that you are watching. And wherever you're watching from, we are on a bunch of different channels. I don't see my Facebook people yet, but we will get them, I hope. We've got Canada in the house, we got Tennessee, we've got let's see, I don't know where Facebook is, but we'll get them in. We will get them in.
New Brunswick, or is it NB? Was it New Brunswick?
Yeah. It looks like we're having issues with Facebook. We had this last time on Facebook, so that was interesting.
Well, you have to blame Zuckerberg. He's letting it down.
Yeah, I know. Okay. So we're just doing a little housekeeping here. We can't always get this dialed in before we go live, unfortunately.
I saw Spring, Texas. Either my sister or my mom live in Spring, Texas, so very familiar with that area. So hopefully.
Okay. So yeah, Facebook logged me out. We'll troubleshoot this while we're talking. So we'll figure it out. And
Surprise. I used to live in Surprise, Arizona. That's from Marcy, looks like. I lived in Surprise. I was at Luke Air Force Base. I was the chief for orthopedics at Luke Air Force Base back in, God, what year was it? 2008 to 2011, I think. So I lived in Surprise.
Is that when you kind of first, when you were doing all the surgery and you started to kind of have an epiphany and
No, that was actually before that. That was before that. That epiphany took place in around 2013, 2014 was when I started to do that. So it was right before. That was when I was just a standard doc.
Okay.
Way operating on people. So
Gotcha. So and everybody comes to their awakening at a different stage. For me, I started to really think about things back in when was it? I would say as early as like 2003 to 2006. I think my late father had cancer, and they gave me some medication to put on his skin to stop him from being agitated. And the medication took effect almost immediately. And it was an aha moment for me, because I started to realize this is incredible. What we're putting on the skin is having an immediate impact on the whole person. And it just, that started me on this journey of really thinking about the interaction between the medical, the food, the products in the home and on the body and things like that. So that it certainly wasn't the great awakening for me, but it was a big part of what got me thinking. I was like, this is really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you a funny, it's kind of almost a little bit offensive story, but I mean, I remember when I was a surgical intern. I think it was, no, I would have been a medical student, and I was doing my surgery rotation, and the chief resident surgeon at the time, so you have the trainees, and then they have a hierarchy, and the one at the top is called the chief resident. I remember we were medical students and sitting outside the room, and this guy is just screaming at a patient who had some complication, and he was screaming about how fat he was, and like, what do you do? Sit around and eat lard all day? And there was a few F-bombs in there. And, you know, we were just like shocked. We're like, this guy's like yelling at this guy. But we were like, you know, because we were seeing all these patients that had really horrible lifestyles, and we felt that that was probably contributing to their problems, and if they would just
Mhm.
fix that. And, you know, I mean, you kinda know it, but you don't know what to do. You don't know what the right
Mhm.
answer is, and you kinda just, you know, like, some people are healthier than others, and some people just are not healthy in behavior, but then you don't have good advice for them. So, I mean, it was kind of funny, but the guy screaming about lard all day, and I'm thinking, well, it's probably not lard. He's probably drinking Coca-Cola, or something equivalent that's driving the problem and not the lard, but we just had that misconception, so
Right, right. Well, that was I mean, that was the big thing when I started, when I was just getting out of college, that was when the fat-free movement was taking hold, and I think that that is largely responsible for a lot of the issues that I had. And we talked about this when you interviewed me on the show. The deep, deep depression and anxiety that I had, I think was directly related to the fact that I was cutting out almost all dietary fat. And I was replacing it with simple carbs, ultra processed foods, and things like that. And I had no idea. I thought I was doing the right thing. And the weight was piling on, the hormones were all over the place. I was in my 20s, and I was depressed and at times suicidal. And it's bad. Now that I understand more about the importance of the animal fats and, the the lard and the tallow and the butter, I feel like I wanna reclaim my time from the '80s, from when I was told by a well-meaning dietitian to do that.
yeah, I mean, the unintended consequences of trying to combat heart disease by telling everybody to stop eating butter and, you know, eggs and meat and red meat and things like that. I think it's the knock-on effect of that has just been tremendous
Yeah.
health losses for many people. Many people have lost. Some people they've lost their whole life, and some people lost
Mhm.
decades. And it's just like, you know, my quality of life suffered so much, and thankfully we're starting to turn that stuff around. I think
Mhm.
somebody from Bath, England. I was there a couple of years ago. So it's right near Stonehenge. It's not far from there. I went out to Stonehenge and went to Bath and had one of the, I guess, the famous baths there. But yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I think this whole God, the damage that we've done to people, I
Yeah.
think it might be one of the biggest crimes that's been committed. And I think some of it was done maybe in a sense thinking they were being altruistic, and really they were just, you know, it's like the you know, good intentions but horrible outcomes. And I think
Yeah.
some of it now is just pure. Now it's just pure greed, and you know, this junk that they feed everybody, or they try to feed everybody. It's really harming people.
Yeah. I think so. I mean, we talked about this on the last episode, what I learned from Callie Means about big food and how they are creating and engineering foods to be hyper addictive. And that's by design. And that there's one thing that I wanted to ask you about, because there's a there's something that's changing under the Trump administration. It has to do with the GRAS,
Yeah,
generally
generally
recognized
recognized as
as
safe food
safe.
designation. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, are you aware of what's going on? Can you
Mm.
talk about that? Because it seems like that's a pivotal change that's taking place that is actually gonna help us.
Yeah, I mean, you know, historically, you know, they're saying, well, what is safe for people? And they would go back to historical food, you know, eggs, dairy products, fruits, vegetables,
Okay.
these things we've been eating for tens of thousands of years.
Yeah.
They've kind of borne their way out that no one's dying from that, or at least not in acutely.
Yeah.
And so they sort of use that designation for all these new products and all these new ingredients, you know, the carrageenans and the polysorbate 80s and the guar gums and the xanthan gums and all this crap that they stuck in the food. And then basically they just left it as a loophole for these companies that make these foods and say, well, yeah, we think it's pretty much safe. They may do some rudimentary testing. Maybe they feed it to a few
Mm,
rats, and if the rats don't die or get acutely ill, they say, it seems like it's okay. We'll stick it in the food supply. And they've never really been tested for long-term chronic effects. And so all these people developing autoimmune diseases, arthritis, dementia, depression, it could be, we just don't know. And so I think, and you look at what we allow in this country versus other countries. I mean, I think we have, tens of thousands of ingredients that are in our food that which are basically not allowed in most the other countries. Basically, it's like you need to prove this is completely safe before we put it in the food supply. And our policy is the opposite. It's innocent until proven guilty. And it's like, well, you need to prove it's sick, making people sick after we've stuck it in the food supply, which is a backwards way of thinking about it. I'm of the opinion we don't need any more food. I mean, new food. We don't need to invent any new foods. We don't need to invent any new flavors or food products or consistency, any of that stuff. I mean, we got everything we need to be a healthy, thriving species. And in my view, I think, and you mentioned what Callie was talking about. You have these food engineers that literally design food to be hyper palatable and hyper addictive.
Yeah.
And yes, it tastes good, but do we need it? No, we clearly don't need it. And when you come back from that stuff, then all of a sudden your taste buds change. You're like, hey, you can say now I can eat a piece of fruit and it tastes extremely and not that I eat any fruit, but I mean, I'm just saying I could, and it would be very, very sweet. Whereas before I couldn't eat the dessert couldn't be sweet enough for me. I mean, it was just like the most sweetest, or the most sugar would be the one I would be most attracted to, because I wouldn't stimulate those, those brain cells unless the sugar content was ridiculous. And I think that we've been trained to. I mean, sugar's in everything, as we know. So I mean, but we've just been conditioned to it. And when you got little kids these days that grow up on ultra processed food, 70% of their diet, I mean, they don't know any better.
Right, exactly. And I was a teacher for 12 years, and the last stint that I did in public school, I was shocked and appalled to see what they were feeding the students. And I was I was shocked to see that that there were these big vats of ranch dressing and ketchup, and that the students were drenching all of their food in ranch dressing, and which is soybean oil or canola oil with some flavorings. I mean, speaking of addictive, it's that's a big problem. I mean, and they're feeding them a almost 100% ultra processed carbs to begin with, and then they're taking that and they're dipping it in these seed oils, um, and then they're living a sedentary lifestyle, and we're kind of wondering, like, why do we have type 2 diabetes with children as young as 4, 5, 6 years old? They now call it diabesity, because it used to be adult onset diabetes. And, like, what are we gonna do? How are we gonna change that?
Yeah, well, I do think. Well, I mean, if you listen to the sort of the medical system, the answer is put these kids on Ozempic shots, put them on cholesterol lowering medications as kids, as 6, 8-year-old kids, and we're just gonna continue to drug our way. And that's just not the answer. I mean, the answer, I think it's pretty intuitively obvious. We just got to stop eating garbage, and we need to fix our food supply. And hopefully, like I said, if we were to truly fix our food supply, it's going to have a huge it's going to be economic turmoil. You think about all of the restaurants and food companies and gas stations and supermarkets that it's just swimming in this stuff. And if you're saying, hey, that stuff is not good for us, here's the deal. Like we have this USDA that puts out the dietary guidelines, which I think is a conflict of it. They shouldn't be doing it anyway. I think we talked about it on another show, because their job is to sell commodities, corn, soybeans, whatever, wheat. And I think they should not be the ones recommending guidelines. But even if we do, if we look at the current US dietary guidelines, the grocery store doesn't really represent that. The grocery store is, 70% ultra processed food. That's not in the dietary guidelines, just for people who don't know that. But do you say, look, we're going to incentivize those places that sell what we think is healthy food, and somehow disincentivize those pieces that don't? I don't know. I don't know if you can do that. with free
Mhm.
market type stuff. Would people complain too much? I mean, again, it's what are we willing to accept? Because there's a lot of people out there that will say, don't ban anything. And I kind of get that, and I'm kind of with that. I mean, because you need it's like,
Mhm.
well, what if they decide they're going to ban red meat, which they've been talking about for years? I mean, there's
Yeah,
a lot of places that would like to do that.
the slippery
Um,
slope.
yeah, so it's a slippery slope. So you got to say,
Mhm.
yeah, I think what you comment on something. It was something the other day I remember, and I can't remember what it was, but it was something about that slippery slope thing. I think it was had to do. Oh, it was junk. I think it was Snap. I don't know if you saw. Did you see that? I mean, and so in Texas, they proposed legislature to remove sugary drinks and ultra processed
Mhm.
food from the
Mhm.
SNAP program. So that is to say, people on welfare
Yeah.
can't use that money, the food stamps, to buy garbage.
Mhm.
And a lot of people are like, that makes sense. I mean, why would we subsidize it? Because it's only leading them to be
Right.
sicker
Right.
and then more dependent on the system and more unhealthy, and it costs more money
Mhm.
down the road. And why don't we incentivize these folks to?
Mhm.
And then other people are saying, well, it's unfair that poor people can't eat junk food when rich people can. And I think that's a kind of an interesting discussion. What are your thoughts
Mm.
on that? Do you have any thoughts on that?
That is that's fraught with, different implications because on the one hand, there's the school of thought that everybody makes choices and that, the fact that somebody is on food stamps is the result of different choices. Some things are out of their control, right? But I think there may be a way to come at this with maybe a happy medium where because I think that if you suddenly stop all of this and take it away, then you're going to have this kind of egalitarian war, right? Kind of the proletariat rising up and saying, that's just not fair. You have to let everybody have the choice. And then you have the people who are subsidizing it and saying, I don't want to pay for people uh, to get these foods that make them sicker and then pay for their health care when they do get sicker. And I think that's a valid argument. And so I think there has to be I don't think it's as black and white as people want it to be because I can see the argument on both sides.
Well, but
However,
I
yeah,
was gonna
what
say
do you
there's
think?
precedent like cigarettes. I don't think you can use SNAP dollars to go buy cigarettes or
Okay,
alcohol,
that's
right?
true.
So
Yeah,
we've already said, hey, you guys can't
yeah.
buy certain things that other people might. And if you want to do it, use your own money. So I mean,
Mhm.
I don't know. I mean, I think it's an interesting thing. I mean, the thing I wanted to bring up with that Texas thing
Yeah.
is that Coca-Cola sent no, not a Coca-Cola. The American Heart
Pepsi.
Association's no, it was
Oh,
American Heart
oh,
Association
that's right. Yeah.
sent people there to testify against this legislation, saying that we think poor people should eat junk food and should have the right to. This is the American Heart Association saying this, which you would think they would be on the side of
Mhm.
let's get people healthier and not do that.
Yeah.
But for some reason, they were really adamant to do that, which is interesting because
Yeah.
the American Heart Association is funded by PepsiCo
I
and
was
some of these
gonna
other
say,
companies, right?
yeah.
Nabisco probably. So you've
Yeah.
got this really bad conflict of interest at the American Heart Association and the American Diabetes Association
Mhm.
and the American College of Physicians and Surgeons.
Right.
I mean, on and on and on. You've got all these crazy conflicts, which
Isn't it, I think, 6 major corporations that own
yeah, some
all
ridiculous,
of
like
maybe fewer than that,
95% of
like,
food or something like that. Yeah.
Nestle, PepsiCo, they manufacture all of the foods,
Yeah.
and so the piece, though, that I think is important is the education piece and the buy-in, because obviously, if you get the buy-in for the healthy foods, it's going to be more appealing, even to poor people, and, you do I think it is important to address the fact that it's not as easy for people in poor neighborhoods and inner cities to access some of the foods that so-called rich people can get. And I think if we can make that more accessible, then it's going to be easier for them to choose with when they're on Snap to choose those foods. But, when you have Little Debbie snack cakes by the dozen at the checkout for $1 and you have a limited budget on your SNAP card and the strawberries are $5.99 and you've got 3 kids at home, that's kind of a no-brainer. You take the strawberries home and they're gone in like 10 minutes, right? And so I feel as though we have to find a way to balance out what's available to people and also, kind of do what they do at Sam's and Costco and bring these foods in and give people a chance to taste them and try them. Not that poor people have never had strawberries. I'm just saying that there's a lot of healthy foods that people aren't really having access to, and so they're not necessarily gonna choose it. And people don't cook either. That's the other thing. And so w I don't know. I'm optimistic that we can change things, but I also feel like there's definitely an education component and a bridge factor that needs to come into play, right? What do you think about that?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. We need to educate folks, and like I said, it's very doable. I mean,
Mhm.
I use the COVID response where we educated every American ad nauseum, ad infinitum,
Yeah,
to stand 6 feet away and wear a mask. Everybody heard that messaging,
yeah.
and yet not everybody could be hearing, hey, this is not something you should eat, or I mean, we have the facility to do that.
Mhm. Mhm.
I want to, you mentioned the checkout counters because I think there's an interesting story behind that, which I
Yeah.
found. I talked to a guy that worked for one of these big candy corporate. I think he worked for like Mars or something like that.
Mhm.
One of these big, and he said they're actually losing sales out, and they've seen a decline. In part due to the fact that these self checkout lanes that now occur, because you normally you go to the grocery store, you check out and there's like all the candy, it's everywhere, candy, gum, crap, and it's right where
Mhm.
the kids can get it. So they're like, the kids are begging you to have it if you're a parent. And the reason that occurred apparently was they talked about back in the 19, I don't know, 40s or something like that. Gum, like Wrigley's Juicy Fruit gum was being
Mhm.
stolen, right? And they were complaining about because they're small and people would slide it in their pocket and walk out with that. So they
Mhm.
said, well, just put it up near the register. Put it right so no one can. So they if they're going to steal it, they're going to reach right in front. So that's where they started. That was the initial incursion, where they
Oh,
started putting.
interesting.
Then they started putting all the other snack
Yeah.
food out there. And because of the self checkout lanes, and there's no room really to put these little things, the sales have gone down. And so now, like I've noticed in my grocery store when I go there, they kind of precariously perch like Reese's peanut butter cups, and a few things are like stuck. They're still trying to get you to get them, but there's no little aisle, so the sales are down on that stuff, which I think is generally a good thing. Because you don't need to be eating that crap. I mean, in my view.
Right.
But
Yeah. Well, and especially, if you go to the store hungry, that's the number one rule
mhm,
of thumb. You're gonna grab more convenience foods, more sugary things like that. And if you're eating a high-fat carnivore diet or a ketovore diet, you're not typically hungry when you go to the grocery store either, because you're so satisfied, right? You don't get hangry, you don't have those dips in your blood sugar. You're basically kind of even keeled across the board. So I would say that, and I mean, one of the things too that I think is changing it is the online, the grocery delivery, right? Because you don't have those impulse buys, and typically, like if you have your cart that you have purchased the last time, you can go in. So, like, if you bought short ribs or roast or steak, all you have to do is say, "Buy again," and then it gets sent, and you're not getting bombarded with all of these things, and you're probably not starving when you're doing it. And so, I mean, I think that's a good way, especially for somebody who's trying to avoid those cravings and you're trying to kinda retrain your kids. Maybe try doing online ordering and pickup or delivery because that gives you more control over what's coming into your house, right? And it
yeah, that's a
also
fair point. I mean, I think it's a
yeah,
double-edged sword because a lot of people use that to order junk, and they don't even. I
I
mean,
know.
that's where they don't even move. I
Well,
mean, it's like
that's like the DoorDash, right?
right, yeah.
Yeah. I'm thinking more of grocery delivery because, like, for me, because I take care of my stepdad, he's 87, my time is limited, and so the grocery delivery has been a huge time saver, but it's also saving me from impulse buys, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah, no, I can see that for sure. Yeah, because
Yeah.
the grocery store. the meat and the dairy are in the back of the store, so they make you
Yeah.
walk through all their crap food,
Yep.
and I just
Yep.
kinda I've gotten to where I don't even I just walk right through and,
Yeah, I do
I
too.
did do an impulse I tell you what I did do an impulse buy today because I was in the, dairy section.
What'd you get?
I got some butter, and I was like, because my when we were in Portugal, my wife was talking about some of the butter she liked, and so I said and she's French, and so when she's overseas in Europe, she'll have a little bit of bread. That's her vice because she'll be like,
Yeah.
I can only eat the bread in Europe or whatever." And she was talking about how good the butter was, and so I said, "Well," I walked in there and they had some butters out there, and I saw a bunch of different brands, and there was like Kerrygold, and there
Mhm.
was this President butter, which is voted the number one in France, and there was some German butter and some other Normandy French butter. I think it's
I'm gonna
uh,
find it because you posted it. I'm
yeah,
gonna show
Isigny,
everybody.
Saint Mare, Saint
I
Maur or something
Il
like that.
Yeah, Île de Signy, that's a really good one.
Well, yeah, and so I did a little taste test this morning. It's kind of funny. I took a little, yeah, those, and it's got like 300,000 views on that stupid little post about which butter do you like. It's like funny on Twitter,
Are
and
people fighting? Are we having a Twitter fight over the
well,
butter?
I know that everybody's had their own opinions, and they posted some of stuff. It's kind of interesting, and so I tried it, and I actually did a video where I just did a taste test, and I liked the what is it, the
This
Isigny,
one.
is that
Yeah,
yeah.
Bœuf de
Yeah, yeah.
Signy. Yeah, that one's from Normandy, right? Or Brit
Yeah, that's the one I liked the most, and then the President was second, and then the third one was Kerrygold, and the last one, the German was last because it just didn't
Was
taste
it
like
like
it
a
was
cultured
completely
butter?
I can't remember, but it had no flavor. It was just like
Interesting.
nothing. Whereas the first one, the Normandy butter it had a nice taste and it was very solid. It had this AOP designation, which I think gives it some
It's
sort of seal
it's
of
amazing, yeah.
authenticity.
Do you
Yeah,
know this? You
yeah.
probably know this because your wife is French, but in France, it's illegal to put margarine on the shelf near the butter. Yeah.
Interesting. I did not
Yeah,
know
at
that.
least when
Yeah.
I lived in Geneva, so I was right across the border from France. I think it may be in Switzerland as well, but because dairy is a huge part of the dairy is a huge industry in France and Switzerland, and,
Mhm.
that's where you see, like, all the cows and, the yodeling and the alpine festivals. They're grazing those cows up in the Alps in the summertime, they bring them down in the fall to the valleys, and it's a big part of the industry there, and the butters there are butters there that are produced only in a very short window of time. For example, the springtime butter that is produced from some regions of the Alps or Normandy, you can taste the spring onions in the butter because that's when the onions are coming up in the grass. It's very interesting, and I mean, your wife probably knows a lot about this, but there's many many different kinds of butter in France, and it's fun to go and you know try the different ones. And I think Isigny is a really really good one, and there's a lot of little ones like that. And some of the farmers in the U.S. are starting to do similar types of artisanal butters. There's one I get sometimes, it's called Banner butter, and that has little flakes of sea salt in it.
Mhm.
So it's kind of fun. It's a nice little indulgence. If you're trying to load up on butter, like some people do, where they eat sticks of butter, I wouldn't recommend that
Mhm.
because you're gonna break your budget.
Yeah, that's expensive. Yeah, I mean, because like the cheese, and obviously we're all familiar with the different varieties
Yes.
of cheese, and there are
Yeah,
thousands of them. And the French are particularly proud of their cheese making, and for good reason. I mean, there are
good.
some good
Mhm,
cheeses, as do like the Spaniards and some of the other folks
mhm.
around the world. I was just in Portugal, and we had some nice cheeses and so on and so forth there. But
Yeah,
yeah, it's fun to, because I mean, it's like a lot of people say, well, it's like people criticize carnivore diet is boring, and there's not, but there are lots of I mean, like I said, when your palate has been bombarded with blue and purple and rainbow colored food and all this nonsense, this Reese's peanut butter flavored cereal, it's like
yeah.
that's not what we're supposed to eat. So you can have quite a variety on a diet of just whole foods. Just at
Sure,
that.
sure, yeah, and I think, when it comes to things like this, I'm looking at your comments on YouTube, and everybody has a different take on dairy, and I think one of the things that is important for people to keep in mind is, if you're dealing with some really big metabolic issues and you're trying to do healing, there's things that, like, you may not be at the stage where you're experimenting with different butters or creams or cheeses, and that's okay, right? Because some people need to be super strict on where they are in this in an elimination diet. But hopefully, people will get to the place where they're healthy enough and healed enough where they can do these types of things, where they're kind of playing around and going, "Okay, I'm gonna try all these different butters," or "I'm gonna get some hard cheese just for the weekend," and things like that, because I don't think we're meant to be in a place of what people feel like is deprivation, because that adds to the stress too, when you feel like, "Oh, I can't have this." But like you're saying, when you retrain the palate, you get out of that mindset where you're thinking, "Oh, I can't have this," or "I need to have a cheat day," right? I mean, do you ever think that anymore? When do you ever think, "Oh, I get to have a cheat day. I'm gonna eat, like, a bunch of carbs and ultra processed foods," or
No, I never, like, plan for that or, like, say, I know if I do this and that, then I get to have it. It's not to me get to, it's like, sometimes you're kinda stuck, and
Mhm.
it's like, it's either starve or eat
Yeah,
something, and that doesn't happen very
yeah.
often, to be honest. I mean, but I mean, like I said, I'm pretty darn good. I mean, I think 98%
Mhm,
of the time I'm on target. It's very easy. Every once in a while, something will slip in that's not like what I would normally,
mhm.
but it's not something that I look forward to or plan or
Right.
count on or I even need. It's just,
Mm,
one of those things. And I
mhm.
don't necessarily beat myself up about that,
Yeah,
but I think
yeah.
it's, one of those
Yeah.
deals.
Speaking of planning, it's time for a quick break, and I want to let people know, first of all, about the project that you've been working on with Rivero. Let our listeners know, because this is very exciting. It's a accessible, but you talk about it, because you're able to talk about it better than I am.
Yeah, yeah. So Rivero.com, we are a health company. We're a digital health company. We're basically now in all 50 states. And one of the frustrations people have is they go to the physician and it's just more pills, and they don't really discuss or know about nutrition very much or how to implement it. Or if you tell them I'm on a low carb or a keto or carnivore diet, they want to put you on a statin and tell you to stop
Mhm,
or something like. So our physicians, are basically empowered to work on root cause of disease, and they're having fun. I mean, we've got so many physicians that want to come work for us because they're now seeing people get healthy. And again, it's not designed for you to be on it for the rest of your life. It's like, let's get you healthy, 3 months, 6 months,
mhm.
whatever, 9 months, whatever it might take, and then get you out of there. I mean, it's not this recurring model. It's like
Yeah.
there's a window where we think we can get people healthy by doing the right things, supporting them with physicians and coaches and daily support, because a lot of people need the daily support that,
Mhm,
that we provide, which is something I never had as a physician. Working in the standard system, you just don't get that. And so this is something that we've used to do that, and we're growing like really
mhm.
nicely, and lots of patients now coming in. Just since we just opened it up to all the states, and lots of new providers, and it's fun. I mean, it's fun to be a doctor again, which is something, and it seems like you shouldn't have to say that, but that's the truth. Most physicians are quite honestly, even though they make decent
Mhm.
money, they're not happy doing what they're doing because all they're doing is shuffling medicines around sick
Sure.
people. And it's like the
Yeah.
Titanic, and so it's like rearranging the deck chairs on a
Mhm,
Titanic, and not
mhm.
like, hey, let's move the damn
Yeah,
iceberg.
yeah. And with Rivero, do you feel like your clientele are pretty dialed in by the time they come to Rivero, like that?
Some of
Okay,
them are. Yeah, I mean, some are referred to, like, by their family
okay.
members, like, they're dialed in and they're like, "I don't really need it because 'cause I'm already healthy, but, hey, my sister
Mm,
could really use, or my uncle or my
mhm,
cousin or my
mhm,
whatever, my my coworker," and so a lot of that is we get referrals from
mhm,
people, and then we can kinda get them on board, and if, obviously, the patient has to be
mhm.
willing to
Right,
make
right,
changes,
right.
so
Okay,
we have a screening process, and if they're like, "Hey, I'm not willing to change anything," well, then we can't do
sure.
anything for it. But if you're willing to and want the
Mhm.
support and the education, the training and the motivation and the labs and all the stuff that we
Yeah,
support people with, and that
it's
that works
fantastic.
out well.
Rivero.com. It's right up here on the screen. You can scan the QR code and go directly there, and input your information and get connected with those guys. They're in all 50 states. And any plans to push out overseas with Revero?
I would like to. We'll have to see.
Okay.
I mean, that requires, languages, licensing in other countries. So there's a
Mhm.
lot of
Okay. Yeah.
legal and stuff to
Yeah.
do that, which makes it
Yeah.
hard. Because when you're practicing medicine, you have to be licensed where you're
Right.
practicing, and they all have different
Right.
rules and different regulations.
Sure.
And so just the 50 states in the United States enough was challenging
Yeah.
because every state has some to have very different rules than others. So
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we do have a functional medicine team that we work with here on the Mary Grace Show that is working with people in different states, and
Mhm.
it's amazing to me that they're able. I mean, not all this, but all the states, but different countries as well, like Canada and multiple countries. And I'm like, I don't know how you do that. It's crazy, but they do. And okay, so we're gonna shift gears here and go back to food because there's one thing that I want people to know about. This is one of our sponsors here, and this is pretty fantastic. When we talk about beef, one of the things that people are finding out is that American farmland is under threat of being bought up by corporations, and also the way that the food is grown. We don't even always know where the food is grown. And one of the things that we have with our sponsor here, Grid Down, Chow Down, you've met these guys and talked to Jordan.
Mhm. They're good
Yeah,
folks, by the
really
way,
good
really
guys.
nice
They
guys.
work directly with the farmers and ranchers right in the middle of the country. They're based in Oklahoma. What this means, grid down, chow down, means if the grid goes down, you can still chow down because you've got freeze-dried, American-grown, grass-fed, grass-finished beef. And it's right here in this package. This is the 1 pound. This is 1 pound of grass-fed, grass-finished, freeze-dried ground beef. They are also bringing in some other products like pre-made burger patties, fajita meat, um, and breakfast steaks, minute steaks. You can go to that website, griddownchowdown.com, use promo code Mary Grace. If you opt for the 24 serving subscription model, which is they're just you set it and forget it, they send it to you, you're going to get 4 free servings. And also mention that you saw it on this show today with Dr. Sean Baker. Let them know where you heard about it. We're going to play their ad. They're out in the field with the farmer, and I think you're going to love this because they're right out there with the cows. We'll be right back. We're going to hear from our friends at Grid Down Chowdown, and we'll be right back to finish to pick up this conversation. Hang out and remember griddownchowdown.com, promo code Mary Grace.
Hello, I'm Jordan, and this is my brother.
And I'm Nace, and we're the Grid Down Chowdown, and this is Larry, who is a local rancher that we've partnered with.
Now, Larry, you've been ranching for over 4 generations, is that correct?
That's correct. I'm 3rd generation, my son's 4th generation, and I've got some grandkids that are 5th generation.
Man, that's
We've
awesome.
been here for quite a while, yeah.
All right, now, Larry, your cattle is grass-fed, grass-finished, and pasture-raised, just like God intended them to be.
Yes, because I want to know what's in that animal,
Right.
what it's been fed, and so the only way to do that is for us to keep it all natural, just like God has done it for years and years and years, thousands of years. How has partnering up with us helped you and your ranch? Well, it's allowed us to develop a market that we didn't have before, one that can get directly to the consumer, and that's great.
And just remember, more importantly, with every package that you buy, we put a salvation track in there. So from the bottom of our hearts, we thank you for allowing us to do what we believe that God has us here to do. And just remember, God loves you. He really does.
Amen.
Go to griddownchowdown.com. And that is right there in the heartland of America. Again, every time you purchase from them, you're helping to save American farmland. If anything that you've heard today is going out of your mind and you can't remember it, just go to my website, marygracemedia.com, and you can find all these links for the things that we're mentioning here. You can also get on the mailing list so that you don't miss any future shows. Go to marygracemedia.com and get on the mailing list. You can also contact me there through the website. There's an email address at the bottom. So we're here today with Dr. Sean Baker back into this great conversation that we're having. And I wanted to ask you a little bit more. I want to talk a little bit more about the food because we were talking about European butter and things like that. And you said your wife likes to have the bread. Which I don't blame her when you go to Europe because it's so good. But one of the things I keep hearing is when people go to Europe, they say, I ate this and I ate that and I ate bread and I ate pasta, but I actually lost weight. Do you hear that? Like, what do you think is attributable attributing to that?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly hear that, and I think, it could be that, the food is a little bit different, so we don't have all these chemical irritants to the degree that we have in
Mhm.
the US. Maybe they're not as hyper palatable, so we tend not to eat as much. The European serving sizes tend to be smaller than the US serving sizes in
Yeah.
general. So you just kind of like sometimes you just eat like you're trained to eat everything on your plate. Don't and just you just
Mhm.
finish it. No matter what's on there, you finish it. And then I think the other thing that's interesting about many of the way, most of these European cities were, 4, 5, 600 years old, right? Like the big cities, and they were not designed for cars, and so they're all very walkable places, and so they tend to have this concept of everybody walks a lot. Like when I go on vacation, we walk a lot. I mean, we probably triple our walking, during that time. So I think that
Mhm.
also has a role there. I think there's a
Sure.
couple things going on
Yeah.
there. No, it's certainly you can go on vacation and pig out and get off your diet and eat garbage and then end up gaining weight, or maybe losing some muscle. Depends. I
Mhm.
mean, when I was there, I ran sprints
Yeah.
every day. I worked out every day. Maybe my wife would get up at like 7 o'clock in the morning and run. It's kind of funny. I'll tell you a funny story. We were staying at this hotel right in Portugal, this town called Ericeira, which is a little old fishing village. It's now kind of a surfing mecca,
Is it near Nazare?
and they've got this little it's a little bit south of Nazaré. It's probably about an hour and a half
Okay.
south of Nazaré, which Nazaré is where they have the biggest waves in the world.
It's
Like this,
crazy.
there's a movie out there, the hundred
Yeah.
foot wave, where this guy surfed this. I think it was like 84
Yeah.
feet of inch is what it really was.
Yep.
But so we're there, and I was like, well, I want to run some sprints, and I want to run on the grass, and I had a little grassy area, which was maybe 30 meters, 40 meters. It's just enough to do a little bit of short sprinting. And I got out there and I was setting up to run and did a little, skipping and hopping drills. And it's like 7 o'clock in the morning. And the guy who's apparently working the park came up and says, "Hey, what are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm just going to just running some sprints." And he said, he's asked me if I speak Portuguese. I said, "No, I don't speak Portuguese, And, eu now follow Portuguese or something like that. I don't speak Portuguese. And he said, "You can't do that here." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, you're not allowed to do like exercise in the park." And I said, "What?" And he said, "Yeah, well, if we did that, then everybody would be here exercising. There'd be people doing yoga and all this stuff. And, and we wouldn't want that." I'm like, why wouldn't you want that? So I just thought it was a little
What?
weird. Yeah, it was just a weird thing. And then I was like, well, he goes, well, I said, well, where can I go run some sprints? He goes, well, you can run all over. And it's like all these cobblestone streets. I don't want to do that because you're
Yeah,
going to twist
yeah.
an ankle trying to run sprints on these cobblestone roads. And I was like, well, you can go to this next town called Mafra and go to their complex. They've got like a track. And so I went there to ask, and I said, yeah, you can go. You pay $2.50 or €2.50 to run. And, you could have a membership so you could run, which is only €10 a month, which would make sense if you live there. But it was like, you can't use the exercise facility without health insurance. Like you can't literally run outside without health insurance in case you were to get hurt. It's just, it's bizarre that they're trained into this. I guess it's more because Portugal is basically a
Yeah, I
socialist
was gonna
country.
say
I mean, in
that's
their
the nanny
constitution
state
is,
at work right there.
yeah, it's just like you can't go outside and exercise without some sort of doctor's note or something like that. That kind of annoyed me a little bit because I'm like, oh, I mean, so I ended up running anyway. I ran on the next day. We ran on the sidewalk and we just kind of like, we're going to do it regardless. But I mean, it's just to have someone say you're not allowed to exercise in a park. Really,
I
it was really, you would never get that in the US, or I don't think you would.
like during COVID, when they were filling in the skate parks with sand and ridiculous things like that, I've never heard of that. I mean, that's crazy. That wow. Wow.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I
Yeah.
was like, you're
Yeah.
kidding me here.
Yeah.
I'm not here. I don't know. I mean, it's, obviously you got to respect you're in somebody else's country. You
Mhm.
want to,
Mhm.
but you're like, because we were talking to a guy and it's kind
Yeah.
of interesting in Portugal. There's kind of uh, I think they're in their third government in 3 years. Their government can't stand. They're having all this sort of political chaos right now, where they can't decide where they're going to go and where they're going to become. I think what's happening in the world throughout the
Mhm.
world is we're having a lot of ideological
Yeah.
crises in what they want to do. I mean, there's some people they're really clamping down on the hardcore left socialistic type stuff, and there's other people that are like trying to become more populist and say, look, let's break away from this stuff. And so it's interesting to see where that's going to shake out over the next half
Mhm,
decade or so, which
mhm.
will be kind
Yeah,
of an interesting
yeah, it's
time.
well, and the thing is, I was in Portugal, back in the '90s, and it was really one of my favorite places. The people were
It's a neat place
so
for sure. Yeah.
nice, just so friendly, and it was funny because I was on this little tiny island called Faro, and it was like a barrier island, and I ended up staying with a fisherman and his wife.
It's not in the Azores, is it, or near
No,
there?
it's
No.
it's it's down, almost, like, across from, Tunisia, right? Across from Morocco, Tunisia, that area, like and
Oh, so it's in the south near the
near yeah, in the
Algarve. I see
Algarve,
the
it's in the
Algarve
Algarve, yeah.
area. Yeah.
And so I went there. I made the mistake of going the guidebook said, "Just show up, you'll find a room." Well, it was, like, high season, and all the people were going for the weekend, the ferry was packed, and I get there, and there's no place to stay, so I end up going to the little, store, and they called a guy, and he came and got me, and he and his wife rented a room to me, and it was wonderful because it was I was just stayed with local people, but it was kind of funny because I was in this little village, and everybody came to the bar to see the American. It was really fun, right? Because I was like the token American that showed up on their little island, for the first time in I don't know how long, but they were just so nice, it's just, to me, a shame that the culture that European culture has come to a place of such turmoil, and I because there's so many good things about Europe. I mean, like, when I was staying with this farmer, we had, they he was a fisherman, sorry, the fisherman, the he went out every morning and dug clams, and he had those little teeny tiny vongole that you get out of the sand, and they cooked those, and they served them with potato like, garlic and all kinds of herbs, and they had potatoes and fish. It was just, like, right out of the sea, and that's what they're eating, and I think that that is one reason that they're so healthy, right? Is because they're getting the food and bringing it home and preparing it. Um, right? I mean,
Yeah, a lot of fresh food for sure. Obviously there's some coastal
yeah,
seafood for sure, but that's something I noticed
yeah.
and going to little grocery stores, it was all just very fresh
Mhm.
stuff, which is nice to
Yeah,
see,
and when I
you
was
know?
in Switzerland, I was thinking about this. You could buy 1 egg at the grocery store. You could just buy an egg, which
Mhm.
I thought was very interesting. It was 50 centimes, right? And, just an egg. I mean, imagine doing that in the US, right? Just going in the store and, "Can I buy an egg?" They would look at you like you're crazy, and we don't even have these little markets like that, which, I feel like if we could go back to the roots of local markets and not necessarily farmers markets, because to me that's a little bit contrived and it's a lot of work. I feel like we need to have smaller local markets, kind of like, I guess, like bodegas, where the food is there every day, and you can go in, and like in France and Switzerland, it's the alimentaire, right? And you go in and you buy what you need for the day and you cook the food that day. That seems to me to be much more supportive of local agriculture, local culture, local sustainable type of living and supporting a local economy. I mean, in this country, we've gotten so industrialized. You're getting food that's shipped in from all over the world, and it's not even in season. And then our meats are coming in from God knows where, and they're processed. For example, Smithfield is owned by China, and the pigs
Mhm.
are, the livestock is in many cases sent to China for processing, and then it's brought back to the US. Like, how can that sustain you? I just it's weird to me. It's very strange that we do that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we have a system where it's like more efficiency, more profit, shelf stable, because if you can stick something on the shelf for 6 months, there's no point of it. It's not going to get returned. So, I mean, there's, we've kind of, in the name of profit, we've lost some things. And I think you'd have to, it's like, I don't know if you could transition, but it's like when we go to these self-driving cars, there's going to be a transition period where you've got, some self-driving cars and a lot of non-self-driving cars. And do we get to the point where we're all in these self-driving cars? I don't know. I mean, is that going to take a generation or something like that to sort of integrate that? If that's the future, it may not. I think it probably will be.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
might not be.
Um,
And then the food system, the food system is the same way. I think.
yeah, it is. And I think, I mean, it's, it's like, it feels like on the one hand, I want everything just to be simple, just go back to simpler times. But on the other hand, for example, like for me, I have an autoimmune condition. You and I were talking about this off screen, and I have Hashimoto's, and it didn't happen overnight. It became, it's an autoimmune condition that somehow my body started developed antibodies that attack my thyroid. And then that affects the function of my thyroid. And there are many, many, many people who have that, and they have it undiagnosed, right? And so, the simple answer would be just change your diet, clean up your diet, fix this, fix that, and then it will reverse everything. And we've actually seen people who are examples of reversing autoimmune conditions with carnivore diet. But for me, for example, when I talked to my doctor this week about my blood work, he said your thyroid numbers are so bad that it's a miracle that you're functioning, much less at the level that you are. And I wonder if we could talk about that a little bit, because I have a feeling a lot of people are in that boat where, on the surface, it seems like the answer is really simple, but then you have somebody like me who is continuing to struggle with this type of thing and, unable to lose weight. I told you, like, before the show, over the holidays, I went kind of off the rails, eating some grains and things like that. Not crazy, not like, fast food, ultra processed, anything like that, but enough that I want to do a reset, right? And be more focused, more intentional about carnivore to see if I can heal my body. But what are your thoughts on that? When somebody has like these crazy numbers that, especially in the allopathic system, like an endocrinologist would look at my numbers and go, you are a complete and total mess. My T3, my T4, the TPO antibodies, everything is just completely off the charts.
Yeah, well, I mean, and I think, we were talking about this a little bit. Some of that has to do with, the numbers and the symptoms, how they match up. Hypothyroidism classically, fatigue, weight gain, brittle skin, dry skin, temperature, cold intolerances and things like that. And so, I mean, we can see like lab aberrations where somebody might have, they may go on a low carb diet and their T3 will fall. And some people will say, oh, that's clearly your thyroid is giving out, when it might not mean that. It might just mean that your thyroid receptors have now become more sensitive, just like your insulin receptors become more sensitive. And we do know that. Steve Phinney has written about that a few years back, and there's a nice article. And there's scientific papers to support this concept of thyroid hormone receptor sensitivity, which I do think is occurring. So I think we're improving that. So sometimes the numbers don't match the symptoms, and that may be right. Why? Of course, I mean, I don't know how, you said over the holidays you kind of went off course. And so maybe that sort of jacked the numbers up a little bit, and maybe related to that. I mean, I would, I think one thing I will say about Hashimoto's is, I mean, there was a recent study that came out like within the last year, and they looked at, it was just low carb diets in general, and looked at Hashimoto's, and they did MRI, they had they did MRIs of the thyroid, and they also did antibody levels. And what they found out was the people that went on a low carb diet would see that their thyroid inflammation went down, as evidenced by the MRI. The thyroid swelling improved, and then also the antibodies went down, which is something interesting. So it might be worth seeing that. That certainly you can check. I'm not necessarily suggesting you need to get an MRI of your thyroid, but it might be that if you do a cleaned up version of carnivore, maybe you'll see a reduction in those antibodies. I know, like I said, I've met you. You're not, in my view, you look like you're pretty good weight. You don't look like you're obese, but you said, technically you're considered overweight or something like that. But we have, like I said, I mean, I'm also, I kind of teeter on obese. My based on my height, whenever I'm over 253, I'm in the obese range. And when I'm under 253, I'm considered overweight. And right now I'm right on the edge. I'm usually like, when I woke up this morning, I think it was 250. Probably after eating my meal today, I'm probably back over 253. So I kind of walk that line, but I'm generally pretty lean. I mean, I'm not, you wouldn't look at me as a big fat guy. I'm pretty lean. So,
it's interesting too, because
muscle weighs
and like I
fat, so,
carry it well, I because I have bigger shoulders, I'm well proportioned. So people don't look at me and think, oh wow, she could really stand to lose 30 pounds. But I was telling you, like, I fluctuate right now between about 145 and 149, which for me at my height it feels like I'm walking around with like 5-pound bags of sugar or something attached to my thighs and my belly, right? I don't feel good. And I also imagine, like, what would I feel like um if everything were, if the antibodies were down and I were really fully functioning, like, how would that be? How what would that look like? And the weight loss obviously would be a benefit as well. And the stamina, the lower inflammation, lower cortisol. I will add to this as well. One thing that I think is a factor is that I am caregiver for my elderly dad, and that is a stressor in and of itself. Anybody that's doing any type of caregiving, uh, even just juggling the other caregivers that come into the home, right? It's like managing a staff. Um, and you have a lot of ups and downs with that, and there's a lot of uncertainty. So I think that there's probably a cortisol component to it as well. Is that something that you see that comes into play with people who are struggling, in spite of, even if I were doing a stricter version? Is that something that you see?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that when we think about things like obesity, inflammation, I mean, there's more than just a dietary
Mhm,
component to that. And so there's a whole lifestyle continuum, whether it's how are we
mhm.
sleeping, how are we moving
Yeah,
throughout the day, what is our relationship with the sun as far as the circadian
mhm.
biology.
Yeah,
Again, I do think that you have to consider, not just what you're eating, but when you're eating, how much you're eating, how frequently you're eating. All
mhm.
those things are going to have an impact on
Yeah,
these things.
yeah.
So I mean, like I said, the diet is critical. I mean, what you eat is
Mhm.
incredibly important. I just don't think you can eat garbage and have success over the long term. At least most of us can't. Particularly given the nature a lot
Right,
of this food becomes hyper palatable, hyper addictive, easy to overconsume.
right.
So I mean, step one is to clean up the diet, and then there's other things you do
Right,
after
yeah,
that.
somebody in the chat on YouTube just said blue light raises cortisol, and that's something like, I'm working on that, right? Don't bring your phone to bed, right? Go to bed
Mhm.
and turn out the lights and go to sleep. Get up, look at the morning sun. I'm doing that. Walk in the grass, do grounding, things like that. And I'm trying to give myself the freedom, to be in the role that I am in my life, and at the same time be intentional and mindful about these things, and then give myself a break if things aren't perfect, because then, you add stress when you're thinking about it has to be a very
Mhm.
specific way, right? There's like this double-edged sword that you can get so stressed out about it that then you're raising your
Yeah.
cortisol, right? It's like,
Yeah, I mean, it is because it's like ultimately, I mean, no one's going to have a perfect anything. If it's not just diet, then it's EMF and microplastic. I mean, it's just it's never ending obsession with having the optimal health in order to maybe live a little bit longer. Which then you ask, well, what is your quality of life? And I think there's a line you have to draw. I mean, yeah, you could say YOLO, you only live once, and I'm just going to eat garbage and drink and smoke and whatever and do stupid stuff, and then yeah, you might enjoy it acutely, and then you shorten your life. So yeah, everybody's got to find their balance on what's practical and what's
Do you
doable.
think some of it is
And I mean,
genetic? Like, okay, like President Trump. I mean, he eats, well, I don't know if he still does, but like Diet Coke, McDonald's, and he's got this.
well, I heard somebody just said he's now removing the buns from his
I did
burgers,
hear
so he
that, and
might be adopting more because yeah, I think he's lost a little bit of weight
yeah,
recently.
I
So
think
I
he
mean,
has, and I think I have heard that, but I think just in general, I mean, the man is a machine. Right? I mean, even his grown sons will comment and say, he just like he's texting me at 3 AM. He's just got so
mhm.
much energy and he has so much bandwidth. And I mean, whether regardless of how you feel about him, as a person or a politician, like he's an example of one of those people that just has this endless energy and isn't doing the right things that, technically.
Yeah, I mean, it's like Warren, but what is it? Warren Buffett's
Mhm.
another guy. He eats garbage all the time. He's what, 90, something
Yeah,
like that, 93, or I don't know how Warren Buffett is, but yeah, I mean, yeah, some people, I think, yeah, I do think genetics will
yeah.
play a role, and probably a significant role for
Mhm.
most of us. Because I was like, well, my grandparents and my dad says both lived to 95. I was like, cool, but then my dad died at 77. Of course, he was a smoker and died of lung
Okay.
cancer. But
Yeah. Yeah.
so, I mean, it's one of those things where you know, I don't know. I mean, I certainly, I mean, you can't do anything about it. I mean, well, maybe you can. Maybe we'll have gene alter and gene editing stuff, that's another slippery slope. It's like, it's like, can we edit our genes to
Mhm.
prevent a disease? And at the same time, is it going to turn us into some island of Dr. Moreau experiment where you get all these kind of crazy, you know, gene edited human species that are, who knows what's
Mhm.
going to happen with that.
Mhm. Well, believe it or not, we are an hour into our conversation. We try to,
Wow. That flew
yeah,
by.
and
Yeah. Let's do
yeah,
it
we
again
want to
for
keep
sure.
these to about an hour, so that as you're coming in listening, you can kind of plan your listening time here on this show. We are going to reconvene and continue these conversations, and so please, if you are not already, please follow me, follow Dr. Sean Baker. You can find all of my channels here at marygracemedia.com. I'm on Facebook, YouTube, X, what's the other one? Instagram, Rumble. You can find me on all of those places. And Dr. Baker, what's the best place for people to follow you?
So it's going to be S Baker MD. So capital S, capital B, and then Baker MD. I'm on Instagram, Sean Baker 1967. So it's SHAWN and then Baker 1967. YouTube, Sean Baker MD. Facebook, Sean Baker MD. TikTok, Sean Baker MD. Rivera.com.
Yes.
I'm there. I actually meet with all the patients once a week. I would meet with all the patients, which is really fun. I enjoy doing that. I'm also at carnivore.diet. But yeah, those are where I can be found.
Excellent,
So.
excellent. And one thing I want to remark on is that I think on your X post today, you told people to drop their questions in the chat. So we didn't get to questions, and maybe we can do that next time. But you might have some questions in on X to answer because I think people were
Yeah, I'll do it on a
yeah,
video.
I think
Yeah, we can
people
do it
were
on a
dropping
video at
some
some point.
questions for us, and
Yeah.
like I said, we wanna honor the time, we wanna keep this at about an hour, and, I think we'll figure out a way definitely, um, if you do have questions and you want us to address some of these issues in a future show, feel free to email me, info@marygracemedia.com, if there are certain topics that you would like to see more attention to, that you think might be appealing to the masses. We're certainly open to that. Anything else you want to add as we close out?
Uh, yeah, I mean, I just think that my message continues to be kind of the same thing. I mean, I think Your health is in your own hands. Don't outsource it. Learn, educate. Don't trust me. Don't trust Mary. Find out, test it yourself. Trust but verify, as Reagan used to say, and go from there. And but I just don't think you can trust. Unfortunately, you can't trust anyone. You can't trust our government. You can't trust healthcare agents. You can't trust your own doctor. Unfortunately.
Yeah.
Realistically, I mean, there's some that may be more trustworthy than others, but I think as a general statement, shouldn't blind trust leads to some
I
problems.
agree.
So question things and figure it out and verify in your own way. And the nice thing is, unlike things like climate change, I can actually verify my health. It's very easy for me to get up in the mirror in the morning and look at myself or to know what I feel like. Whereas I don't know about the climate. I got no idea. I honestly do. I got to rely on somebody else to tell me that stuff, and I can't independently.
Yeah,
verify it.
exactly. And I will close like I always do is go outside, touch some grass, touch the ground, get your feet on the ground, solid ground. Look at the sky. Leave your phone behind and take some time to breathe and just find a good place of balance. We will see you back here soon. The Healing America and Beyond series will continue with Mary Grace and Dr. Sean Baker. Everybody have a great day. Thank you so much for tuning in and for all of your meaningful and thoughtful comments. We will be back